Good evening and welcome to Artist Talk on Art on Monday, December 18th at 7 p.m. I'm Doug Shear, ATOA president. Tonight we're going to look at the phenomenon of artists as curators. In the last copyrighted Zoom event of our 49th year as the longest running independent forum, in those 49 years we've featured over 8,500 artists, critics, historians, and curators in over 1,000 talks. Founded in 1974, next year will mark our 50th anniversary, and we plan to celebrate that with a gala event in May and a major art auction. End your year and ours, if you would, by giving us a helping hand. You can donate to us before December 31st, or any time for that matter, but we'd like you to do it before December 31st. See our website and click on the Contribute button, which you'll find in the support page. Our first dialogue of the 50th year will feature artist Mark Kastabi, interviewed by artist and critic Walter Robinson. Mitch Pilnick is both the organizer and moderator of tonight's panel discussion. He is an art insurance professional working with artists, art galleries, and arts organizations. However, he's even more than that. With a sincere love and support of those in the visual arts community, spreading information via word of mouth and social media. He's also a true advocate, connector, and networker. He has been an Artist Talk on Art board member since 2013 and has created and moderated panels focused on career marketing advice, including finding affordable studio space and many other subjects. One of my favorite moderators. Okay. And now I'll turn it over to Mitch, and he will introduce the rest of the panel.
All right, very good. Doug, as always, thank you so much. As I always mention to people that, I've been blessed to be a board member of ATOA. And when people don't know who ATOA is, I mention that it's the longest running panel discussion, but most importantly, and due to all the efforts of Doug, that are archives in the Smithsonian, which is a real feather in the cap. So as always, Doug, thank you so much. Also, I want to shout out to Miriam Deutsch, our programming committee director. She's been of great assistance in pulling together all of our panels. I must say that I wasn't the one that thought of this idea. We have a former intern, Miriam would remember the name, but I remember months ago she had brought up some ideas and I thought, wow, artists as curators, that's a great one. So I want to thank her out there, even though she's no longer with us. She was a great contributor. Great to see friends in the audience, including Lori Horowitz. Great to see you. And Barry, a real pleasure to have you participate. Barry was very influential as far as past Zoom meetings, etc., that we had conducted, and we owe our thanks to him. All righty, so artists as curators. I'm going to start off. We have three panelists tonight. Audrey Anastasi, Issac Aden, and Patty, where are you there? Okay, Patrica Fabricant, great. All righty, so I'm going to start it off as far as, and by the way, we're going to do about 15-20 minutes for each panelist. Any comments or questions you have, feel free to put in the chat room. I'll take a look at them later and possibly add my own, considering the time that we might have left remaining. Okay, I'm going to start it off with Audrey Anastasi. Before I had even met Audrey, I had seen her work at various exhibits such as Brooklyn Waterfront, Art Collision, and knew that she was very involved, including her gallery with her husband, Tabla Rasa. And what struck me was her as an artist, quite talented, very unique vision. and I'm very pleased that she was able to join us tonight. Quick little bio. Audrey Frank Anastasi is a prolific, visual artist, curator, gallerist, educator, philanthropist, and arts advocate. Anastasi is an alumna of Pratt Institute, where she studied painting and photography. She has exhibited in over 20 solo and 200 group shows. Her original refugee series of forced migration themed artwork was shown in a solo exhibition from October 2022 through January 2023 at the Brooklyn College Library Gallery in collaboration with the Valentine Museum of Art. Anastasi collage series was first exhibited at Welancora Gallery, Brooklyn in May 2019. 2018, 10 paintings were exhibited in Painting to Survive, curated by Yale critic Jonathan Weinberg. In 1990, while teaching anatomy for artists at Parsons School of Design, Audrey challenged herself with incorporating an exercise that she gave to her students into her own practice. She started painting with her non-dominant left hand. The paintings of that period were seen by renowned feminist art critic Cindy Nemser, who wrote an essay about the series. They became lifelong friends and colleagues. Anastasi's work is in numerous private and public collections. In 2005, with her husband, Joseph Anastasi, she founded Tabla Rasa Gallery in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Audrey Anastasi continues to serve on the board of directors of the Brooklyn Arts Council and Hook Arts Media, formerly Dance Theatre Etcetera. Audrey Anastasi is also president Emeritus of Brooklyn Waterfront Artists Coalition. So it's my pleasure to introduce Audrey. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mitch. That was a very kind and a very, very nice introduction. I want to thank you for inviting me to this panel. I want to thank Artists Talk on Art. It's a venerable organization, not just the age, but the quality throughout the years. And so I'm delighted. So I'm hoping that my screen starts to share immediately and I don't waste a lot of time. And it didn't do that. Okay. There it is. Okay. So I'm open to any hints if I'm not doing things quite right. I think there's a way to make it bigger, but if you guys can see it, I'll stick with, what I have here. So I'm going to start by just saying this is Artist Talk on Art, obviously, and I put that lovely graphic in. So I am first and foremost a practicing artist. That's my first love, and that's my greatest interest. I am a gallery co-founder, co-director, co-curator, and I think that's what a lot of the artists who are tuned in, want to hear about. What's going through the heads of those of us who are deciding to show artwork. I'm not sure why that just happened. I'm an arts advocate and a philanthropist. And philanthropist sounds a little bit like highfalutin. I don't think you have to pay for or donate a wing to a hospital to be a philanthropist. I think that if it's in your heart to help others, especially artists, and if it has meaning, and you really believe that that improves the world, you too can do work and make donations that make you a philanthropist. And I'm an educator. I used to teach at Parsons School of Design. I love teaching. I've taught at other situations, but not right now, actually. Now, as an artist, does everybody have like this red thing showing on their screen, or is it just me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what that is, but it's going to be in everything probably. It just appeared all of a sudden. Anyway, in my process as an artist, I try to foil perfectionist tendencies in my practice. So in other words, I could make things very, very perfectionistic very easily. So the ways that I do this, because it makes it a more interesting challenge for me, is I use my non-dominant left hand, as Mitch had mentioned. I work very quickly, and I'll mention that with a few things. I use oversized brushes, and when I'm doing my collage work, I use big swaths of paper. I tear paper, and I work in sort of a wild process. Okay, so the issue of the right and left hand, this painting that has the red mark on it, is a right-handed painting. It's a panel that's maybe 17 inches square, more or less. And that was done from photograph. I did study photography at Pratt, and I would do my composing in with the camera, and then I would do a fairly realistic kind of representation. The one that's on the left is a portrait of Otto Niels. He's a very renowned artist in his own right, and we did portraits of each other just for fun, but then it turns into a little bit more. And so that's done with my left hand and in a matter of hours. I usually do one sitting. Let's see if I can just go down here. Okay, a very important project, and I thank Miriam also for her part. She hosted an exhibition of my refugee series, and this is a limited edition book that has been produced by the Valentine Museum of Art, which has the work, and it was really a wonderful collection. Most of the paintings in that series were done on these passport folios, and I just show you that to give you an idea of what the substrate was, and it's the size of a real passport. And when you used to get your photograph taken for your passport at a local drugstore or photographer, they would slip it into this folio to keep it from getting crunched before you got to send it in. So this is an example of what some of the paintings look like. And if you look carefully, I'm going to try something. I hope I don't make more marks. Okay, I can bring my screen up. You can see where the well, I'll do it with this cursor, where the photos would slip in, and you can see some of the text that's on these pre-printed portfolios. Okay. So these are just a couple of examples, and there was 180 of these small paintings. Somewhere along the line, I decided that was a good number to use. And those of you who might be familiar or have a Jewish background, that's multiples of 18 are symbolic of life. And I thought with this series, that was kind of an important thing to do, to keep in mind. Originally, the series was supposed to be shown at Medgar Evers College, and this photograph was taken February 15th, 2020. I was signing these posters, and if you look carefully, again, I'm going to try to show you, it was due to open March 1st, 2020. So that was a little piece of bad luck. The COVID came, the pandemic came around, so that got postponed. But this is a sample of what some of the work looked like at the Valentine Museum, which is a private museum in Brooklyn. And this is what the exhibition that was mentioned, that Mitch mentioned, that took place in the Brooklyn College Library Gallery looked like. And it was just the most beautiful setting for to create a warm atmosphere to look at the work. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to another part of my practice. I'm working on a lot of collages right now. And this is an example of the way that I'm working. I'm starting with smaller collages that start from a life drawing. So you see a charcoal mixed media collage on the left. And then what happened was this piece got sold, and sometimes artists go through a little bit of like difficulty letting go of things. I really loved this piece, so it gave me the idea of trying to reproduce it or recreate another version of it large. So I did it on a panel 60 by 48 inches, so you can see it in a shot that shows scale, and then you can see the painting. So some of the things that were from a collage, out of magazines, I then ended up painting in a similar way, because part of it I wanted to be true to, and part of it I wanted to, sort of just go wild and do differently. So that's an example of how I'm working right now. And this is another example where you see scale of one of the oversized collages. Now, this is a painting or a photograph showing me starting a live portrait. This is a photographer by the name of Ming Smith, and she's a wonderful photographer. So she came to my studio, and basically she stood for the painting probably 4 to 5 hours, of course, with breaks during the day. And when she walked through the door, I hadn't met her before, and I saw that beautiful face and those braids, and I just was like tickled. So this is the finished painting. You could see the size, you could see the scale, and then this is another person, from that series. This is, and these are all left-handed pieces. These are 2 pieces that I just threw in. They were not commissioned portraits or anything like that. But they're just favorites, and I thought, what the heck? Okay, so let's go to something else. That's kind of a parting shot of me in my studio, and again, you can see the scale of some things. It's a really messy studio shot. I think we were having roof work done right out that door there. So now we switch to the curatorial journey, and I don't know how we're doing on time. I was going to set a timer. But here I am with Marty Markowitz. This is when I was leaving the presidency of Brooklyn Waterfront Artists Coalition. How did I become president? I was the last one to say no, thank you. So it was one of those artist-run organizations, and I had been kind of active with them. I didn't have any background in arts administration, but I said yes, and it was actually the beginning of a wonderful journey to put the time and the attention into helping other artists. And I still show with them, and I still participate. So this was 2004. I was getting a plaque that I was now president emeritus. And that was Marty Markowitz. Any of you from Brooklyn probably know who he was, and he was a great advocate for the arts and for a great cheerleader for Brooklyn in general. So this is our logo, and this is our ribbon cutting when we opened the gallery in May of, what is going on here? Of 2001. I mean, 2005, May 1st. And I put in the names of the people who were there. And this is another shot, and this was one of our first exhibitions. And it was really exciting. This was called Summer in the City. And when we would we still do continue to mostly do group shows. One of the things I try very hard to do is to curate work that's different from each other, and then to install it in a way where each artist has their own presence, where you don't have to necessarily pick up the price list to see which artist did it. I try to group things so that you get a sense of that. This is another exhibition that we had. We called it Novus Solo. It's a lot of fun to kind of do a play on Latin sounding names. It's got sort of a natural gravitas to it. And that means something to the effect of by ourselves alone. There's actually some phrase non-novus solo, which we aren't alone. But for this, it was the theme of the show was that an artist had a very personal vision, and we tried to pick work that we just loved on that level, not really relating thematically in any other way. This was a show called Sanctuary, and again, the names of the artists who can be seen are there. I can go back to this later, but I don't want to take too much time right now. I don't want to go too far. Let me go back a little bit. After Sanctuary, this was one called About Face, and we have this lovely sort of panorama of the work in this show. And one of the other things about this show that's interesting, or about the way we curate, a lot of galleries and a lot of art projects really focus on a particular tier of artists. In other words, they wouldn't put a fledgling artist next to someone who's had museum shows necessarily. Well, we are very free to do whatever we please, and that's one of the things we really love to do. So going from left to right, the first drawing, which is not very hard to see. It's a beautiful oversized drawing by Simon Dinnerstein, who is a fairly well-known higher tier artist. And right next to him is a bust made out of white birch, a head by Janine Bardo. This was her very first art exhibit. And it was very exciting that for her, because she sold that piece, and it was her first show. And then, you know, there's another lots of other artists. Some of them you may know, some may not. But in some of the other pieces in this exhibit, also focused on the face. But as you can see, every piece was very, very different in character, and that's important to me when I'm putting shows together. What do we like in a particular artist? There's an ineffable quality. I can't put my finger on it. I can't say there's a formula, but somehow you experience it in a way that you can't put into words. And I like using the word ineffable to describe it. Here is a photograph of myself with Cindy Nemser, who was mentioned as, she was a feminist art critic, and Sylvia Slay, who I think in this picture was celebrating her 90th birthday at one of our shows. And it was just very exciting to get to know both of these women, who sadly are both no longer with us. And Cindy co-curated a show with me. And this is an installation shot. It was called Women's Work, and she invited a lot of the artists that she knew as a feminist art critic. And this is one of the pieces from that show by Sylvia Slay, a double self-portrait. One of our other shows, here's two pictures from something called Bridges Icon. And in the left picture, you see some school students that came in, and you see there was like a huge photograph in the background and a Philomena Murano paper cut piece right on the very, very left. And then on the right is a second room that we have, where there was a wonderful installation by Ginger Andro and Chuck Glixman, who work as a team. And it had footage of the original some of the original crossings of the Brooklyn Bridge. It had projections, it had mirrors hanging and turning and reflecting light. It was just a really, really interesting installation. The next image I just took off of our website, and I invite you all to go to the gallery website and look in the archive, and you'll see pictures from the various shows. But it's not very well updated. We're having a little trouble getting into it to update it, but the old shows are really fun to see, because there's always a page you can click on and see the images that I had prepared for publicity. So Beatrice Carone is on the left. These are cut paper pieces. This was also her very first gallery shows were with us, and she is a very prolific public artist. And on the right is Peter Gergely, who has a second career as a doctor, or a main career as a doctor, but he does these wonderful, I'm going to try to enlarge this, watercolors. This was a show, an obsessive art show. And this is a watercolor of all these teeny little berries and stuff. Anyway, it's quite wonderful. You can probably tell from the way I'm talking that I really love the artwork that we show. We also do some public work. So this was a reading of a book called My Selma. The piece in the back was from that obsessive show. The artist, Michael Watson, would throw rice on the panels and burn them, and he got these, really stunning effects. And this was another public art piece that or a project that we did. It was a fundraiser for Play Pumps, and it was Danny Simmons' idea that I had seen him do something else, where we created these very long panels, this very long panel, and all the artists were invited to exhibit or to paint on it. And then at the end, we took an X-Acto knife and we cut it up, And you see me here. Some people took them home in the moment, but when people made their donation to the organization, and Mitch, you'll like this, directly to the organization. It's not like they wrote me a check and then we wrote them a check. I just collected a stack of checks to Play Pumps International. And if they gave $75, they would get a piece of a certain size. If they gave more, they would get a larger piece. And here I am with, like, you know, the remainders after all the artists had gone home, and I'm in the process of sort of selecting work that I thought different contributors would like. I'm almost done, guys. I hope I'm not over. And then I just couldn't help it. There's so many wonderful artists that we've shown frequently. This is Tom Bennett. He was in a show called Animutations, which was a funny little word that was made up referring to purebred dogs. And I thought it was a fun idea because the idea of artwork about animals, I wanted everything to look different. So it was important to us that it was artwork first. This was another Chuck Ginger Andrew Glicksman piece, where the video was a dog getting out of his dog bed and running up to the front and eating, and then they had the half a dog bowl in reality, and it was just a real, like, sort of fun, mind-blowing work. And these are a couple more artists that weren't in any of the installation shots, but we love their art. We've shown them very frequently, so I'm just showing you some more examples, and you can see we're quite eclectic. It's not like we only go for a certain style. And this was an installation piece. And this is, you know, work getting ready to be hung, and that's it. So, okay, I hope I hope I didn't take too long. So like I said, it's very important that the individual artists have a presence in any of the shows that we do. We have a wide range of artists, and I can't put my finger on exactly what quality is, but you know, we just get so excited. We love, you know, doing this. So thank you.
You appreciate it. Okay. All right. Thanks, Audrey.
You're very welcome.
Great presentation. Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see. Can we close? Yeah. We're good. Okay, great. Our next panelist will be Issac Aden. And let me just see. Are you there, Isaac? Yeah. Okay, great. Isaac, I had just recently met. I had attended on October 16th at Powerhouse Arts in Brooklyn, which is an amazing art type of mecca place. So check out Powerhouse Arts. I was invited by Maria Van Voldrup, who has done the Ad Art Show for, I don't know, maybe since 2016. And we had become friends. And I was very pleased that she invited me to the Ad Art Show for 2023 at the Powerhouse Arts. So at the conclusion of the Ad Art Show, they were giving out awards and presentations, and that included Isaac as far as being the curator of the Ad Art Show. So knowing I wanted to do this panel, I thought, oh, I have to meet Isaac. And we got an opportunity to meet. And I was very pleased that Isaac is a panelist this evening. So quick little bio on Isaac. Issac Aden is an American artist, curator, and writer. Formerly the chief curator at the Jerome A. Cohen and Joan Leibold Cohen Center for Visual Arts. He was named the chief curator of 7 art fairs, including the Ad Art Show and the Accessible Art Fair. Aden has curated over 50 exhibitions at a diverse set of institutions, including the following: the Bronx Museum, Sotheby's, Powerhouse Arts, the World Trade Center, the Jerome A. Cohen and Joan Leibold Cohen Center for Art, Hunter College, the National Arts Club, Ethan Cohen Fine Art, David Richard Gallery, Spring Break, and CBGB's. He is a board member of the White Box Art Space. Aden is a pioneer in the field of digital curation, having developed and executed the first citywide digital art fair in New York City. Partnering with corporate sponsors, including Link NYC, Systech Systems, and NBC Universal, over 13 million people viewed the first fair. This model was expanded nationally with the support of Outfront Media, TikTok, Time Magazine, and Google to include presentations in Times Square, Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, Houston, Miami, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Boston, and Washington, D.C. Issac has been awarded various fellowships and grants from the COSAC Foundation, Creative Capital, the New York Foundation for the Arts, and the United States State Department. So it is my pleasure to introduce Issac Aden.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Issac. I'm an artist and a curator. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think, you know, my journey into curation kind of happened accidentally. I was curating before I really even knew what the term was. I'm an artist, pretty much first and foremost, and all the other things have kind of followed along. So I think I was probably a teenager and I was part of this artist organization. I was living in Nashville before I moved to New York. And this one, it was a group of artists. There weren't any real serious places to show. Most of them were just kind of like tchotchke galleries or something. And so what would happen, this was in the 90s, is the artists would organize together. They would get, one person would get a radio sponsor, one person would get an alcohol sponsor, and they would do these massive exhibitions. Actually, can we start sharing the screen too so that I'll put this up at the same time. So it was called Entitled, and what they would do is put on these giant shows that were really more like spectacles or music events because there wasn't a lot going on. So tons of people would show up, and I was a young artist. And so what I kind of learned from this was if you wanted something done, if you wanted lights, if you wanted wall text, if you wanted anything like that, you needed to take your own agency and you needed to figure out how to do it. And you needed to do it. So that's just kind of my introduction into organizing exhibitions. And it was also artists were organizing exhibitions. You weren't waiting for somebody else to do it. You were doing it yourself. So if you wanted to show, you would go and get some of your friends who were artists and you would create a show. And this started, you know, very small. I was doing exhibitions in federal buildings. I didn't even know got recommended. And I'm gonna just go through the different types of exhibitions I do. Can we start sharing the screen? Yeah.
If you want to share your screen, you see the green share
Okay.
screen.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay. 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 So there's a lot of different types of exhibitions that I've done, but I'm going to start with this one because this is one that I really care about a lot. This is a monographic exhibition by a dear friend of mine who passed away of COVID. His name was Ed Shostak and Rose Royale. So I met him. He was a cocktail waitress at like a weird club that I was going to when I was really young. And he said to me, "Oh, I'm an artist." And I thought, okay, good for you. Isn't that great? You know, that's what the world needs, is another artist. Because I was really young and I kind of a bit dismissive. And then as I got to know him better, I realized that he had been in the first Whitney Biennial. He had won a Guggenheim. He had been shown at Leo Castelli. He had been represented, you know, at a lot of major exhibitions. And long story short, he passed away in the first kind of weeks of COVID. I had never met his family, and you know, he was gay, so he didn't have any children of his own. And he had a great rent-controlled apartment, but all of his artwork was probably going to go into a dumpster so that they could, you know, rent it out for however many thousands they're renting it out for now. Somehow I got in touch with his sister, and it was a bit challenging because his work involved scatter pieces and early kind of sculptures, and there weren't really digital images. There weren't any images. He was a very private person online. So I tried to talk to a couple galleries and try to convince them to come to this loft where, you know, he had actually passed away of COVID and look at this stuff, because we kind of had one shot to get someone to commit to doing it before it would all just go in the garbage. And not because the family, you know, didn't respect him. She respects him greatly, but you kind of needed some kind of commitment because the amount of stuff and the difficulty. So he put this exhibition on that was kind of a survey of his work, which combined sculptures, drawings, Let me see. He also was he kind of stopped working conventionally as an artist, and later on in his life went into kind of a social practice and this kind of trans persona that he had. So he had a lot of photographs, and it will be presented some of his gowns, the wigs, the drawings. There was an immense amount of material to work with. We presented a lot of archival stuff, big blown up wall panels. This also occurred about within 1 year of his passing away. So it didn't really get as much attention as it really probably should have. We had some of the wigs. He had wigs with names on them, and he had these wonderful sculptures. He also had been interviewing people that were taking medication to become trans in the 90s. And, you know, he also had these kind of formalist pieces. I'm not going to go, you know, too much into detail, but this is another exhibition. This is by Jeffrey Hargrave. This was at the Bronx Museum over 10 years ago. And Jeff is a painter. He's a Black gay man. So a lot of his work has to do with his own identity, his relationship to race, his sexuality. And this is just an installation shot. Before I actually installed the show, I installed it all exactly 1-to-1 scale with all the paintings so that then I could measure it out in the studio before it actually went to the museum. This was at the Bronx Museum. So that way then we weren't kind of doing all these nails and stuff. So I work in a variety of different ways, but in this particular one, I actually installed all the paintings exactly to scale and just made measurements 1-to-1. And then we installed it. One of the interesting things about this body of work was he had a lot of Black nurses with white babies. So he had a whole kind of exhibition within that was based on that. This was an exhibition I did of an artist named Fernando Pintado. This was the title they picked for the show. And his work was silkscreen and paint, and it's kind of like a contemporary version of Rauschenberg. There's paint on top of the text on top of the paintings, collage pieces. And this was how his studio looked, and it was just kind of all over. And I had done various shows like this. I did one called Jam Pack, which is the whole wall was just totally full. So what we did was we made an installation putting all of these pieces together. He also has references to more contemporary things like Seinfeld. He had Jerry, this is George, and a reference to the urban sombrero. He was obsessed with John F. Kennedy. And he had kind of an installation like this, kind of a climbing one, and I kind of copied that. I like doing monographic exhibitions because obviously you're able to focus on one artist. But I don't exclusively do them at all. And kind of my curatorial motto is you have to do what makes sense. So the thing about working with Fernando was we had some boundaries to the exhibition, and we kind of needed to create an all-over installation. So we installed it as one piece, and then the opposite side was very sparse. This is a group exhibition that I did, you know, contrasting that was based on the letter B. So it had a thematic sense. So really it's a group show, but it's based on a sensorial cognitive shift. So everything in the exhibition started with the letter B. So say, for example, you would have a brown, a buffalo skin or a ball or black bungee cords. The walls would be painted different colors, blue or beige or burgundy. There would be bear traps with basketballs. So you would have either something sensorial or visual, like say blue, or in this case, it's cognitive, like a bear trap. This is G.T. Polizzi and now Guadalupe Maryville. And it's interesting to work with a variety of different artists. The artist on the right, you know, he's since had a solo show at the Museum of Modern Art, the Brooklyn Museum. He's just really blowing up. Some of the artists I work with have passed away. Some of them, you know, are relatively unknown. Some of them are very famous. This was one that was black bungee cords. This was a beige piece that had ball bearings. That's a detail of the piece. This was Blonde Braids. This is a work by Hugh Hayden. And this is also a piece of his that's buffalo skin with the American flag shaved into it. As a curator, a lot of it, how I organize different exhibitions has to do with responding to work, getting ideas, and then kind of plugging them in. I've used this piece in a couple of exhibitions. So sometimes a work kind of stays with me and I respond to it in a fundamental level. And a lot of my thinking, maybe different exhibitions, but certain pieces I'll come back to, or certain artists I'll come back to. And that's something I do a lot. This was a recreation of a piece by John Kessler. So sometimes an artist will have a piece that I can, this is an advantage of being an artist myself. It's kind of like a conceptual instruction that I can execute. I don't need him to be present. So he had a piece like this at, I believe it was Swiss Institute, and then he had his pieces on top of it. So this is his painting in the background and his photographic and mixed media collage on top of it. And then the entire gallery we filled with blue balloons. This is an exhibition that I did that was called First We Take Manhattan, which is a Leonard Cohen song. So, or not a song, but it's a line from a song. And this exhibition was also a group show, but it was on a one-to-one relationship. So as you went around the show, each piece would have a relation, sometimes cognitive, sometimes in a different way. Like, say, for example, the piece on the left is Martin Roth, and it's a like a bird shit painting. He's kind of riffing a little bit off of Dan Cohen, but he's actually he did a fabulous installation with rubble in a gallery, and he had canaries, and so he actually had this underneath their cage. He was a fabulous conceptual artist. And the piece on the right is by Nick Fari, and he'd put giant swaths of canvas and then have a dinner party, and everyone had this red wine, and it would make these circles, almost like a Pollock, where people would make stains of it. So they're both about accumulation. They both have a similar kind of relationship between the pieces. And the piece on the left is by Andrew McNay, and the piece on the right is by Jeff Confrey. So the piece on the right is made by pouring paints, by cutting it out and removing it. And the piece on the left is he's casting a painting and then pouring it with, I think it was like pigmented plaster, basically. So it's kind of like a fresco, but he's casting the painting. So it's, painting as object. And then the piece on the left, this yellow one, was just followed by this piece on the right. And both of the artists were just named Jeff. So that's the relationship between the pieces would shift like that. So there would always be a strange relationship between the pieces. Essentially, it's just a way to organize a group show. This was by Electra KB. I do this a lot. I like to install pieces like this with these kind of like wall vitrines. This was an artist book, so I made, that's another difference of like being an artist. I made this wall vitrine specifically just for her artist book. This is a show I did called Post-Millennial Tension. This is a work by Thornton Willis, who I absolutely adore. And kind of going back to the idea of seeing a piece or a person, like this is Thornton in his studio, and this is a fabulous painting I never got to show. But, the process of building up a show and doing studio visits and looking at lots of different art, like it all kind of accumulates. I can think of other shows that I want to do. I didn't have enough space. The artist I mentioned with the birdshit piece, if you look in the middle, you see a little fly on the yellow band. And that was a piece by Martin Roth. He did a lot with animals, and it was releasing 3 flies into the gallery. And so I'd asked him if I could do this. He happened to be I think he was in Austria at the time. So I was like running around with a garbage bag trying to catch flies to then release into the gallery. And you really kind of want to do it, in accordance with what the artist wants. So this is kind of an idea of what, I don't know that all curators will go to that length. But it was an interesting thing because 3 is kind of enough that you do notice it. You definitely notice it. It's kind of subtle, but you definitely notice it in the exhibition. This is a piece by Ryan Roach on the studio that I installed with the bungee cords. This is a piece by Shalene Rodriguez, which was a pulled apart kind of milk crate that she had dipped in copper electroplated, and it called for a pile of pennies underneath it. So then I had a vitrine with some of the pennies being in the vitrine and then a pile kind of being on top. So it's kind of some liberties that I don't know that, an artist curator might do, but not a normal one. I like to work with Eric Doringer, who kind of copies other conceptual artists to say this one is, or he doesn't copy them, he re-executes their work, as precisely as possible. So this one, homage to Welancora. This, I had to create visual parallels between the works. So this is, a removal, and then the piece on the right is all glass. It's built up of glass beads. This is by Rainier Ganal. These were quotes from Trump, which at the time kind of seemed silly, but now I just, it's a whole nother world, right? This is a very subtle piece by Craig Kalpakian, who's an artist that's developed incredibly fabulous work. This was another exhibition I did that was called Goodbye Columbus. And this is a buffalo drawing by Rick Schaefer. And this is a Mayan figure in the neon. Trying to go kind of quickly. And I'm sorry to all the artists. I've worked with probably thousands of artists, and a lot of the photographs were slides, or I couldn't get them all in, or they're scattered in different places. The first ad art show we did at Sotheby's, and I don't have good shots because it was kind of like a maze, but it was a really big exhibition. I think it was about 18,000 square feet. And we used this kind of red wayfinding to kind of keep the viewers understanding where the exhibition was going, because it really became like a maze. There were 2 floors, and it kept going. So I would do this kind of like bright color to kind of keep people going in the right direction. And it's kind of some shots of that. I couldn't find the photo I was looking for. This is Susan Anker. We featured her work in the exhibition, and she had these fabulous pieces that were they were kind of like sponges that then she had filled and cast with ceramic, and it was just absolutely fabulous. We had them showing on a plinth. It was all types of work, digital work, photography, and the exhibition was a big success. We wanted to continue it, but Sotheby's was undergoing renovations. And then I was talking with one of the other organizers. Mitch had mentioned Maria Van Vlodrop, and she said, well, we could do this digital exhibition. And I thought, it's not really that compelling. This is before the pandemic also. It needed to be connected to somewhere in space. And I was walking by Lincoln Center, and they had these big kind of Link NYCs, which look like a giant phone. They're like a digital billboard that replaced the payphones. And I was like, it needs to be like something like that, where each work exists in a specific spot and it's kind of assigned to it. And so the thing about her, that she's very good at strategic organization and getting things done that I wouldn't believe. So she was able to make that happen. So we organized an exhibition that was across all the boroughs in the city. And so I was actually curating not based on a space, but on different corners and streets, and thinking about what time of day, how are we going to organize the time of day? How are we going to organize what clusters we wanted to do? It was very interesting and very compelling project. The hard part about that exhibition was we didn't really have kind of a nexus or kind of an epicenter where everyone could gather, because it was spread all around. And what was great about it was subverting the challenge I find of curating, which is the price of real estate. So say we were doing this during Frieze Week, and to find a big venue, it's very difficult because there's only so much space. You can only show so many artists, because real estate just, is so high. It really becomes a problem for nonprofits, I think, and artists in general. But because the show was digital, one of our partners recommended that we work with the Oculus, and they put us in touch with them, as when Frieze Week was going on, it was also a design month in NYC. It was Design X Fair. And the Oculus was there as an architectural feature. So we were able to work with their kind of digital billboards. And so they had this one, say, for example, is about 10 by 300 feet. And if you were to walk through this wall, you'd be at the inside of the original World Trade Center. And they had 22 of these screens all over the place. So, I didn't really have a huge background in, digital curating, but it kind of just happened organically. And then we did that for 5 years. And then this past year, we did the exhibition in person again at Powerhouse Arts, which used to be a power station in Brooklyn, and now is kind of almost like an arts gym. It's a nonprofit, and they have all types of facilities. I really recommend taking a look at it. They have a woodworking shop, a metal shop, a weaving, silk screen, ceramics, everything you can think of. And it's not a school, but people can go and kind of become a member and use the facilities rather than having to have that kind of infrastructure in their own studio practice. And so it's really a community. And in this giant hall, they maintained the graffiti. So we did exhibition of the artwork on top of the graffiti. And you can kind of get an idea. I had the mezzanine too. One of the artists I would highlight is Jessica Alzraki, who was a previous year's winner. And so her work featured Latinx families, and she uses photography to kind of create collages. They're very bright, colorful. They have a lot of pattern. And, so she came into this project kind of as an emerging artist, and she won the main prize. And since then, she's got a waiting list for her work. She's shown in major art fairs. She's got into a lot of museum collections like the Rubel in Miami, and she's become extremely successful. So this is, something that's really nice for me as an artist to see, and why I'm passionate about working with emerging artists is because I want to see people succeed, and I like to be a part of that. There's a lot that go into all these exhibitions, as all the panelists and other arts professionals will understand, that you don't really see that go into it. But it's really a pleasure for me. I was thinking about it earlier, about the friend of mine that passed away. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to be able to present these artists' work, and I feel like I'm better for it. This was a show of women's photography at White Box. This was a space that I did a lot of shows at in Beacon, the Cohen Center. This was how I first got it. And so a lot of it is about kind of creating a clean slate. And then we transformed it into this. Let me see here. The walls are movable. It had a lot of versatility. And this was one of the shows that we did. It was by Adrian Tona. And this is I didn't really show any of my own work, but this is my most recent solo show in Chelsea at David Richer Gallery. It's a real pleasure to be a part of this panel, and I look forward to taking your questions later.
Okay, I'm good now. Thank you so much, Isaac. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on to our third panelist of the evening, and that would be Patrica Fabricant.
Hi, everybody. Let me just get my screen up here. Hold on one sec.
We give a very brief bio of Patrica. Patrica Fabricant is a painter, curator, and award-winning book designer from New York City. She received her BA from Wesleyan University and studied painting in Florence, Italy. Her abstract and figurative paintings have been exhibited widely at such galleries as M. David and Company, Front Room, SFA Projects, Equity Gallery, Morgan Lehman, the Painting Center, and 490 Atlantic. Her curatorial practice includes 3 editions of the benefit group show Among Friends and studio mates at Front Room Gallery, as well as With the Grain and Process and Delight, the new P&D at Equity Gallery. Patrica lives and works in Brooklyn, New York, and it's a pleasure to have her this evening. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you for Artist Talk on Art for including me in this panel. I have a lot less curatorial experience than my fellow panelists, so I think this should be a bit briefer. Like I'm also first and foremost an artist. I see the curatorial projects I've engaged as an extension of my artistic practice, and I really hate the word practice, but there it is. They've all been explorations of ideas that I'm already invested in as an artist, and then I kind of collect other artists whose work feels like it's in the same vein and put shows together around the ideas. So without further ado, here's the first one. So about 20 years ago, I had a studio mate who was a carpenter at the Guggenheim, and he brought a bunch of wood scraps to the studio for us to play with. And I really just was taken by the grain on this one little piece. This piece is only about 9 by 10 inches. And I just decided to paint the grain, and lo and behold, it ended up leading to a sustained body of work in which I explored the various ways I could work with the wood grain. And I always chose the wood because I felt that the grain was saying something to me, which drove the guys at the lumberyard crazy. Lady, there's nothing wrong with this piece of wood. And I was like, well, I'm not seeing it. So I would look for a story that the wood had to tell me. And I played with different types of wood. I actually found that cheap pine was the best in terms of wood grain. The top 3 are birch, and they're just a little more subtle. I started to see shapes and coax them out. You can see an alien figure and a set of boobs in the one on the left, and then another alien in the one on the right. I also actually started experimenting with shapes and imposing shapes on the grain. And all the while I was keeping an eye on other artists who were using wood grain in some way. And I eventually, many years actually after I stopped working with the wood myself, I had the opportunity to curate a show at Equity Gallery that I called With the Grain. And I pulled together artists who either followed the composition of the existing grain. I've got a list of the artists here on the right. So some of them, like me, I'm on the top towards the right, actually just use the grain more directly as part of their compositions. And then others use the whorls and forms more of as an element in the work, not quite dictating the composition the same way, but still engaging it. The top right, that black piece, is my uncle, who at the time was like 95. I think he's still painting, and he's closing in on 100. Although I think he's slowing down a bit, but it was his first show. He had studied with Mark Rothkowitz as a young Brooklynite, and this was his first show. So I was happy to be able to show him. And some of the artists just paint grain instead. So they weren't using wood necessarily, but they were using wood in their work. And then next, here's a few installation shots of the show at Equity Gallery. Following the 2016 election, I suddenly found myself unable to continue to make pretty decorative work. I was feeling this range of intense emotions every day, and I began painting myself feeling these emotions. I was also kind of simultaneously inspired by Lee Krasner, actually, deconstructing paintings that were not successful and weaving them together to create new work. And a friend of mine suggested I try weaving the portraits together. So I started doing that. So here are a few where I would do 2 portraits of myself, 2 self-portraits, always in the mirror, never from photographs. And then I would weave them together. And then I started weaving the emotions together. So I took that first series, these, and I started making what I call these Venn diagrams, because I was feeling more than one emotion at a time. Am I angry and sad that day? Am I bemused and confused? Am I shocked and anxious? So these are my Venn diagram paintings. And then I did another series of this woven self-portraits called the Icon series, where I made these sort of mandala-like forms, and I would weave them together with a more simplistic, not emotion-free self-portrait. And I was using a lot of gold, so it was kind of a nod towards icon paintings, both Eastern, Western, Byzantine. And also at this time, I was sharing a studio with Amy Hill, who's a figurative artist. And I started kind of musing on the studio mate relationship, which is really rather intimate. You end up, if you share a studio with someone, you're basically spending sometimes more time with them, more waking time with them than you're spending with your partner. And it has an intimacy to it, nurtured by the creative dialogue and the daily proximity to each other's process. And I got the idea of a show called Studio Mates and found 5 studio partners whose work shared affinities and who also were friends outside the studio. And Front Room Gallery was kind enough to put on the show. And Studio Mates examined the positive effects of the scenario, the ongoing conversations ranging from the minutiae of materials and techniques to larger questions concerning context, content, and direction. So on the left is Jesse Henson and Alex Gingro, who both work with contrast, with loose and tight, soft and rigid, ephemeral and permanent, personal, political, and work and play. And on the right was Mark Masiga and Christopher Lowry Johnson, and both of them do work that responds to a sense of place, more specifically industrial or forgotten landscapes. And then there's Thomas Broadbent and Kelly Parr, who fluidly intermix the real and the imagined in ways that force the viewer to re-examine the familiar and elevate it towards an ideal. I'm taking some of this from the press release. And then on the right is Janice Caswell and Wendy Small, who both work with accumulation, juxtaposition, and collage in their work. And then finally, there's me and Amy with our figurative sort of iconographic work together. And here are some installation shots of that show. And then after 3 years of painting self-portraits, I hit a wall. I could not look at my face in the mirror anymore. So I had to mix it up. And I was in a show at the Painting Center that responded to the politics at the time, and it was called Fight or Flight. And artists got to choose which of those things, which of those categories their work responded to. And at the time I was doing the self-portraits and I was like all about fight. And then I started migrating over to flight and feeling like it was time to make art that was beautiful and perhaps provided a respite from the challenges that we were dealing with our political landscape. So I returned to abstract and decorative work. And it was it started as just like a little bit of a side hustle. These are very small, just 10 by 8. But then it became the hustle eventually because I just got sick of my face. And then so here's just some more of the work in that series as it evolved. This is gouache on panel mostly, and the patterns get more and more intricate. And this is the newer series that has kind of these radiating shapes. And then also, right before lockdown, I saw a show at LA MoCA that later traveled to Bard College on the pattern and decoration movement, which was a largely female-driven movement that developed in the 70s as a counterpoint or response to the male-centric minimalism and conceptual art movements. And they pretty unapologetically embraced pattern and surface, and they were also influenced by other cultures. It was less Eurocentric than what was going on, the sort of predominant modalities that were going on in the art world. And when I saw this show, it just felt like I finally understood my lineage and I finally knew what context my work belonged in. And it was just such an amazing feeling. And I wanted to do a show of other artists whose work I felt was working towards that same ideal. And I joined up with Janie Crimmins, and together we sought out a range of artists that were working this way, and Equity Gallery agreed to put on this show. The show is just in the past, it was just in this past November. And we included, it was called Process and Decoration, the new P&D. And we did include 2 of the original P&D artists, Arlene Slavin and Dee Shapiro, which I was really happy to have. They're both still working artists in their 80s, and it was really exciting that they agreed to participate. And here are some of the other artists that we included in the show. Marcy Rosenblatt, Oriane Stender, Caroline Wayne, who studied with a milliner and does these incredibly detailed beaded pieces, and Sui Park on the right. Those are all cable ties. You can't really tell from this photo, but that entire piece is constructed of cable ties. And then here's some of the other artists that were included in the show. And you can see it's all really obsessive, very surface-driven, pattern-driven work. And then in the back room of the gallery, we had Charles Clary do an installation of his cut paper abstractions that are set. Some of them actually are collages with body parts and stuff, and they're set in these ornate found frames against this blue wall. And in the courtyard, we had emotional baggage carts by an artist named Theda Sandiford. And here are a couple of installation shots of this show. And we also, by the way, hope to travel this show. We would like to find another venue and move the show, maybe a university gallery. And then last but by no means least, I've been involved in 3 iterations of Among Friends, which is a group show that was inspired by Robert Rauschenberg's piece Hiccup, that I and my fellow curators, Beth Derry and Alexandra Brock, all saw at MoMA, where he made a whole series of works that were 9 by 7 inches and zipped them together. And we sort of separately and together got the idea that we should do a riff on that. And we handed out paper with zippers on it to our friends and basically gave them almost no direction and zipped it all together when we got the work back. And so this was the first iteration, which we did as part of Dumbo Open Studios in 2018. And all the pieces were sold at the same price, and we gave 10% of the proceeds to Planned Parenthood. And we basically just winged it, and we loved the different juxtapositions that you got. It's not curation in the same way as the thematic shows I did, but it ended up with these wonderful moments where the art is responding to what's above and below and on either side of it, and it creates these mini narratives that we were really excited by. And then we did it the next year at the Clemente Center, and we gave it money to the Lower East Side Girls Club. And then we had a little break for COVID. And the third iteration, it was bigger. It was 300 artists, and we gave the money to New York Artists Equity. And it was really amazing to put all this together. And it's just been really, really wonderful to be working with these co-curators and good friends. And I like curating with other people also, because it takes a little of the pressure off. And I like bouncing ideas off of other people and not just trying to have to do it all myself. As a side note, I'm also a book designer by day. And I find that the work I do designing books, the sequencing of art, I do art books primarily, sequencing the art in an art book is not unlike hanging a show. You have to think about what's next to what and what story it's going to tell and how to keep the interest going. And so I think that the skills that I had from 30 years of doing that, informed the way that I hang shows. And also, if anyone ever needs an art catalog design, hit me up. And that's it. Now I have to figure out how to unshare. There. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patty. Great presentation. Appreciate it very much. Okay. Before I get into the chat room, as far as any questions, I just wanted to ask a couple questions to all 3 panelists and get their ideas. A few months ago, I was at an art fair, ran into an artist friend of mine who has curated. So she was telling me what was going on, and I said, "Oh," I said, "You're curating?" And she goes, "Shh, I don't want anybody to know." And with all the artist friends that the 3 of you have, how difficult is that at times when, certain artists you do in a show and certain artist friends want to be included, that you have to say, no. So I'm throwing that question out there.
Well, it's funny with Among Friends, somehow between the 3 of us, we have 300 friends, and we still don't have room for everyone we wish to include. So yeah, we've actually gotten, some of the people we've included in the show have reached out and said, we want to be in this. And we usually say yes, if we can fit them in. But luckily for me, the thematic shows I've done have been so sort of tight to what I have in mind that it hasn't really been a playing favorites issue. It's really like, is your work what I want for this show?
Mm-hmm. Audrey?
Hi. Well, it's interesting. There's a number of artists whose work we love, but because we mostly do group shows, it might not fit in what we have in mind, and it's kind of a sad thing. It's tricky. It's definitely tricky. We've ended up becoming friends with a lot of the artists that we've shown. And sometimes we'll find them at a open studio event, or rarely, but sometimes people will just send us something, and we'll end up speaking to them about it. And yeah, I mean, we would like to have more solo shows. There's a lot of artists that we haven't shown that we would really love to do solo shows, but we're not in a location. We're in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. There's no street traffic. It wouldn't really be fair. I mean, as an artist, I know how much goes into when you exhibit, not only the cost of framing everything and presenting it, and all the things that you might pick up on your own as an artist, but the emotional part of it. And when it's over, it's really sad. The space no longer has your work there. And if we can't really deliver enough sales to make it positive for someone, for the expenses that the artist puts in, it's hard. We don't really want to do that, although artists are grateful and they love having solo shows, and we love seeing solo shows. That's really fun to curate. I really loved a lot of what Issac did in terms of picking wonderful artists and the way he put it together, seeing the installations. And so that's hard. And I will say, every now and then there's some people that I don't think really like me, but I think they're being nice to me because they want to get their work on my walls. I'm not usually paranoid, but I'm sophisticated enough to know that that's probably true too. But fortunately, we've worked with wonderful artists, and we only show work that we believe in, and there is work that we love that we haven't been able to show. But anyway, I'm giving you a very long rambling answer, but it is like a long rambling kind of issue. So
Issac?
I like to show people that are my friends. I would hope that the work I'm showing is an egalitarian basis. I've had a range of different experiences with that. When I was very young, I remember working in a gallery, and I didn't really care for this artist's work. And then I met the artist, and I really loved the work, and I understood that that artist was doing the work that was them. And so I feel like when you know an artist, and then the artist's work matches with their personality, it makes it a lot easier to do. Like I said with the solo shows, though, sometimes rather than trying to come with a curatorial theory or an idea, I like to kind of respond to the artist's work, which is always more challenging in a group show, because obviously the fundamental issue is that the works are different, right? You have people working in all different forms, from photography to painting. So it's how do you fit them together? So when people who I know or who are recommended to me for a project, the fundamental issue, or my motto is, it has to make sense. So I've come up with these kind of creative ideas for exhibitions that I can include a photograph with a painting next to it, or where they're not necessarily on the same type of issues. Like they're not, it's not a painting show per se, or on a specific issue in painting. But sometimes the challenge is, and I've had this as a problem too, where I've worked with artists, I love their work, I want to show something, and sometimes I'm like, it's just a group show. I can't show this kind of major seminal work because it's not in accord or in balance with the rest of the exhibition. It's gonna throw the balance of the show off, and so sometimes that's a problem with specific artists, because they'll be some people just kind of go with it, they want to be in a show, and some people have more requests, to put it politely, about what they want to show and how they want to show. And it's difficult sometimes because some of these shows I'm making up in a very organic way between all of the pieces. They're usually very planned out, but as I'm pulling the pieces. So sometimes, like if I were to have an artist drop out the last minute, it'd be hugely problematic.
Okay. Let me look to see. Thank you all three on answering that question. Let me see what questions might be in the chat room. Let's see here. Okay, let's see. Okay, a lot of great comments, wonderful presentations. Yes, everyone loved everyone's. Okay, let's see. All just great comments. Let's see. Here's one from Barry Kostrinsky. Let's see. I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, so sorry. Arte Povera and William Burroughs, among other tones, come to mind when seeing your curatorial vision, Isaac. How is your curation like your own work or not, Isaac?
I think others could probably speak to this too as artists, but I didn't really show a lot of my work. But one of the things about my own personal work is it's very diverse. My most recent work are giant, sprayed oil paintings that are almost at first glance very minimalist, but when you look closer, they're the whole spectrum of color, very fine dots. I've done work with beading, with sewing, with installations. I had whole years where I was just working with steel. And in that same way that in my own practice, I'm incorporating a lot of different forms, mediums, conceptual topics, themes. It's very easy for me to work with artists that are quite different, whether it be photography or painting or video. And I think also too, because of my background, younger in Nashville, there were such diverse artists. Like say as I lived in New York all these years, what I noticed was they kind of artists, a lot of them kind of click together and they're working with similar esoteric kind of issues. When I was younger, artists, there weren't as many. So they were all kind of bound together just by this overarching kind of issue of being an artist. So it was quite normal, kind of believed in the overarching issues of art and presenting it. But I guess, fundamentally, one of the things I do when I'm curating a show of my own work is I'll think as a curator, I'll work with the pieces. I like to be very site specific in the location, and then I'll just find or make the piece that I need. So if I'm working on a show, I feel quite confident if I need something to fill that gap, I can go out and find it or make it myself,
Let's see. Everything in the chat room was basically saying how great everybody's presentation was, etc. If anybody wants to read that, I have a question. A few years ago, was going to curate a show at Laurie Horowitz's gallery at the time, and it didn't come together. But I found it really difficult as far as getting artists together, time-wise, etc. So the question for the three of you is, when you have a show to curate, okay, is this something that comes from your own mind of what you want to do? Is it someone else that recommends as far as a show to be with? How much time do you generally have to pull all this together, or what do you need? Because I know, as far as what Isaac had said in the presentation, there are boundaries to the installations. So if you can address some of these logistic, as far as time, etc., do you use submissions at all? How do you go about it, basically? For all three of you.
Well, we usually have an idea. It might be sparked by a couple of works that we come across, and then we see a theme possibility emerge. And then, my husband and I put our heads together. He's very, very good at remembering different artists' work and what might fit within the theme. So that's the way that usually happens. Logistically and practically, I know that when I was working with BWAC, a lot of years ago, we needed a long advance time because all the publicity was, on a timeline. You had to get things submitted, weeks, months beforehand, depending upon what kind of publication. And it had to be like a hard copy and sent through the mail. And then we had to figure out ways to make it easy for people to access whatever they might need to get the word out about the show. Now we tend to depend on social media. So I see people putting up things for shows that are happening the next day. And I mean, that's a little bit ridiculous. Just because we all have busy schedules and it's just kind of silly. But and also people depend on social media. Everybody thinks they're Beyonce, that if they put something out, the world's going to flop. So I need to sort of remind artists that people don't know who they are, and it's kind of their job to help whoever is presenting a show that includes their work to be a partner in terms of getting the word out, because otherwise it's unseen. And it's important to complete the communication. As a creators, our first job is to make the work, but then we can all be Emily Dickinson and put our poems in a drawer and never have them see the light of day, until the end. But most of us want to be part of the conversation and have people respond to our work. So there is that practical aspect, and but that's my answer to your question, the practical part of it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I've been lucky because most of the sort of thematic shows I've done, I've had a gallery partner, so I haven't had to do everything myself. And then with the Among Friends shows, I've had my girls, we do it all together. But I mean, to Audrey's point, also, it's one frustrating artist can really kind of spoil the experience. And I've been really fortunate that the artists I've worked with have been professional, and I haven't had to go chasing after them. If we need a JPEG, they send a JPEG. But with Among Friends, with hundreds and hundreds of artists, every now and then you do have an artist who just either is completely technologically impaired or just doesn't like to follow orders. And so I implore any artist who's listening here to be professional when you're dealing with curators, because that will make them want to work with you again.
Thanks. Isaac?
It's a bit of a challenge because they're all different. Say, for example, the exhibition that you came to, Mitch, that Ad Art show was kind of the last project I did. I was working on it for over a year, but we took that down in one day. We installed it in one day. We were flying lighting systems, building a stage. There were hundreds of artworks going up. It was very complicated, so it had to be planned out. And it's a challenge to do everything so fast, but that had to do with basically real estate prices. They were a partner with us, the host venue, and so that had a long runway. That we had a submittable process, and I would also say I had a lot of artists kind of follow that, and so it's easier to kind of organize everything when they're all kind of in the same order with a very big exhibition like that. But there's always someone that kind of can't get with the program, and it makes it very challenging from a curatorial process, because then it's just like floating in this email or some way you're trying to kind of keep everything together, because it's all really thought through. When I execute an exhibition with a couple hundred pieces that all has to be installed in one day, it's all planned out ahead of time. It really has to be. And then there's still a little bit of wiggle, because a lot of the pieces I had never actually physically seen in person. So the way they look and the way they feel is different than what they look, on the screen. So I'll make some adjustment. I'm really good at numbers and measurements, and I have a sense of what's the right amount. But sometimes it just needs to be adjusted, and I always try to build that in. There are other places like White Box. When I was curating there, what I really liked about them was that but I still like about them is they're a nonprofit arts organization, and so they can respond much quicker than, say, a museum where the runway is really long. So they can do pieces in kind of a media cycle, and they can respond to a compelling issue like Roe v. Wade, or something other political issue in a very rapid manner that is of something that artists want to do. Whereas, by the time it gets around to the MoMA, it's going to be a couple years later, and all the issues and all the terrain are different. So working with those kind of organizations and doing those types of shows is really excellent. The other kind of different one was when I was working at the Cohen Center, they had studios there in the building. And so it was really exciting because I could kind of walk around do studio visits, say, let's take this one, let's take that one. We kind of carry them all down to the exhibition space. We work on the show, and we had more time to kind of organically develop it. And if I had 5 pieces and we only used one, it wasn't like we're shipping it from another state or something. So it really depends on the space and the organization. But I'm drawn to all of them. You know, I like responding quickly, but I really love if a show can be well planned. I don't think they just randomly get executed in a certain kind of way. You need to be able to respond to all the pieces. So that takes a lot of time.
It's incumbent on me at this point to thank everybody, particularly Mitch, for putting this together and doing an ace of a job moderating it. And of course to Issac Aden, Audrey Frank Anastasi, and Patrica Fabricant, as well as to, and there's too many names to mention everybody, certainly Miriam Deutsch for, you know, helping to channel all of our energies into great programs. Our board members, our officers, and at this point where we're transitioning from our 49th year to our 50th year, I want to say how humbled I feel that I saw all of it, and that we've served hundreds of thousands in audience over that time, as well as, you know, just tens of thousands of people that have been affected, people's families of, you know, artists that have passed, that are benefiting by the archive being at Archives of American Art. And I'm excited to see you all next season. I wish you all a very happy season. Merry Christmas for those who are celebrating Christmas. And we look forward to seeing you on January 8th when we have the bad boy of the art world, so he says, Mark Kastabi, being interviewed by a friend of his, Walter Robinson, the artist and critic. January 8th, 7 p.m., Artist Talk on Art. And thank you all for being with us tonight.
Thank